Hey everyone, I'm Paul Earhart, co-founder of Second Time, and these are my thoughts on the new Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter Co-Axial Master Chronometer Chronograph. Ooh, boy, that is a long name. The Omega Seamaster is one of my favorite watches and probably the most responsible for my watch addiction personally. So I'm really excited to take an in-depth look at the latest model and to give you my thoughts. First things first, a short history lesson on Omega and their quest to make a waterproof watch. Omega's quest to make a waterproof watch started in the 1930s with the release of the Omega Marine in 1932. This was a rectangular shaped case that relied on a case within a case design that would lock together in coordination with a gasket in order to keep water out. Truly ingenious and definitely different from the other waterproof watch design at the time. The Seamaster collection itself was released in 1957 along with two other iconic watches, the Speedmaster and the Railmaster. All three represented precision timekeeping for specific extreme environments, and all of which stood the test of time to be classics in the Omega collection and still in the Omega collection today. The 300 meter Diver was released in 1993 and has truly become an icon in such a short period of time. This watch's history wouldn't be complete without discussing its association with a certain 00 agent, as the Seamaster Professional Diver would be on the wrist of James Bond for 5 films, all of the Pierce Brosnan ones, and the second half of Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. Now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at this watch. First thing that greets you is the packaging, and I finally feel like Omega's packaging has really hit the point where it's befitting a luxury watch. For a very long time, that was my biggest gripe with Omega, was the packaging, and now with this light wood box with white leather and red trim, it screams luxury, whereas before I barely heard it whisper luxury. I love the fact that all of the colors are chosen to match each other, like the white leather interior and the red accents match the color of the operating instructions and the document, wallet, warranty card, master chronometer certificate, and pictograms. I also feel like the box is just the right size. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's the right presentation for a watch like this. So overall, I'm very happy before I even touch the watch. Now, let's move on to the watch itself. The first thing that should jump out at everybody is the extensive use of ceramic. The bezel is ceramic, the pushers are ceramic, and the dial itself is ceramic. So they all use a zirconium oxide ceramic, which is an ultra hard hypoallergenic material that shouldn't fade under any conditions and is ultra hard, so it can take a beating and it won't necessarily scratch or damage itself extensively. The bezel and the pushers are blue polished ceramic, so they have a nice bright shine to them. The bezel itself is backfilled with white enamel, except for the pip at 12 o'clock. That's going to be a green luminous pip. Now the dial itself features a finish that I've never seen on ceramic before, which is a beautiful sunray finish, and it gives an extra layer of depth to the dial itself. Also, if you look just below the center of the dial, you can see the laser engraving that says ZrO2, which is the chemical compound for zirconium oxide ceramic. It also features the iconic Seamaster waves, laser engraved and slightly larger than I'm used to seeing in my older 300 meter Diver, but I like it overall. And I like the fact that throughout the entire family, the size of the engraving is consistent. Whereas earlier in the Seamaster production, depending on the color of the dial or the style of the dial, they changed the engraving size or the stamping size on the waves, and I like the presentation much more now that it's consistent. The dial loom is amazing. All of the hour pips and the hour markers on the dial are this bright blue, and then they're white when they're not sort of charged up. But the minute hand matches the pip on the bezel, so those two functions join together as a green loom, and I think overall it's a very, very, very nice touch. Now, looking at the bracelet's finally put together with screws, so I'm very happy to see that. For a long time, they were the the friction pins and little collars, and it just screamed everything's going to get lost. But I feel like this is definitely a much smarter way to put a watch together. Also, look at the bracelet. You're going to notice that there's both the dive extension and a micro adjustment. The micro adjustment allows the bracelet to slide open just a little bit when it's hotter outside, or you feel like you need a little bit of room to wiggle. And the dive extension is for when you have a full-length wetsuit, and it allows the watch to strap on around the wetsuit while still remaining tight to the wrist. The case back is finally exhibition, and I think that has a lot to do with the movement, which we'll talk about in a second. But I'm surprised that they didn't use the Naiad lock, which allows for all the writing on this bezel, this external bezel holding the case back in place, to be oriented correctly. But I'm sure it's for another model, or you'll see it on a special edition. But just something funny that I noticed there, and it's leaped out at me. Going back over to the other side of the case, I'm looking at the Helium escape valve. The Helium escape valve is now conical, or sort of like tapered to be narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. Omega claims that's for speed of use. I have never in my life heard anyone need to open a Helium escape valve with any sort of urgency, because it's not really a feature that's for open water diving. But again, if they say it's faster, I believe it's faster. I just can't imagine why you'd need to make it any faster. The exhibition case back that I'm such a huge fan of is really only possible to be used in this watch because of Omega's decision to use the Master Chronometer certified Caliber 9900 chronograph movement. The Master Chronometer certification was developed by Omega and approved by METAS, the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology, to test watches with their chronometer certified movements installed in them under the most extreme conditions that they could think of. The watch is exposed to a magnetic field of 15,000 Gauss, absurd for testing purposes, in at least 4 different scenarios. The movement itself, the cased watch with the movement inside of it, during a specific magnetization and demagnetization test, and the chronometric precision test includes 6 positions, 2 temperatures, and magnetic exposure. From there, the watch undergoes a 6 position test with chronometer performance deviation testing, the full power and low power precision testing to make sure that the watch functions the same with a fully wound mainspring versus a 33% wound mainspring. The test to check its power reserve and make sure it can perform as advertised, as well as its water resistance testing, make up the remainder of the testing for Master Chronometer certification. And remember, all of this is in addition to the COSC testing the movement themselves to ensure that they were chronometer certified movements going into all of this additional testing. One of the things I love the most about the Caliber 9900 is the way the chronograph is laid out. So traditionally, you would have either a 2-register or a 3-register chronograph. 3-register chronographs were used to time up to 12 hours. And 2-register chronographs usually time between 30 and 60 minutes. What Omega managed to do is Omega managed to fit the functionality of a 3-register chronograph into a 2-register chronograph. The 3 o'clock subdial is actually all you need to look at to read the chronograph. It features 2 hands, very much laid out like an hour and a minute hand, so that way you can read the time more naturally, and it registers the elapsed time a lot quicker because it's displayed in 1 register. And in this watch, the subdial rings are actually done in blue to match the inner minute track, as well as the hands and the bezel and the pushers. So again, kudos to Omega for having that consistency of color throughout the entire piece. So, how does this watch compare with my more original Seamaster Diver 300 meter? Well, first things first, it is upgraded in all of the logical areas that you could upgrade a watch today. It went from aluminum bezel inserts to ceramic bezel inserts. It went from push pins on the bracelet to screws on the bracelet. It added extra adjustments that would have never been there before. And overall, it feels like a different watch. The loom is amazing, and I definitely can appreciate the fact that now the minute hand and the pip loom on the bezel match up rather than them being all one color on my original Seamaster. I like the idea that they're brighter and that they're easier to read. I also love the consistent color of the blue that you get from manufacturing it all out of the same material. One of the biggest gripes that I have about my personal watch is that the blue bezel doesn't match the blue on the dial, and the blue on the dial is a little flat. So with ceramics, I love the way that the dials come out, and I think that especially with that new sunray finish, it's just amazing and it looks great. I like the laser engraved waves. I like the fact that they're larger than the previous waves on my watch, and I like the fact that it's consistent from watch to watch across the collection, whether you choose to buy a Sedna gold piece or you choose to buy an all black ceramic case. It's just consistently the same size wave, and it's a nitpick from me, but as the owner of a Seamaster for a very long time, it's one of those things that's always bothered me. Pusher design, I'm actually not a huge fan of the pusher design on the chronograph, because the trim piece on the bottom of the pusher kind of implied to me that it was a screw down pusher, and when I picked up this watch for the first time, finding out it wasn't was a little bit of a bummer. I'm not saying that it's a deal breaker, it was just something that I thought was going to be one way, and turns out it really wasn't. I'm also not so keen on the conical shaped crown for the helium escape valve, mainly because it's an item that no one will use in practical use, but it's such a big thing. I originally thought that it was a pretty big eyesore on my watch until I saw it on this piece. The conical shape really doesn't do it any favors, but again, Omega claims there's a functional use for doing it, and I'm not going to argue with them. Overall, I really like the modifications that were made to the Seamaster Diver 300 meter family. They worked hard to make sure this watch is more consistent across its entire range, and it shows. As much as I generally prefer a strap for daily wear, I feel like this is one watch that really needs the bracelet. The bracelet itself has become iconic, and I personally love the way it fits and the way it wears on the wrist. I also strongly feel like this watch is so substantially different from previous Seamaster Diver 300 meters that I would strongly consider getting one myself and not feel like I was owning two of the exact same watch. So that's my take on the new Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter Co-Axial Master Chronometer Chronograph. This watch is available right now at Second Time, and I feel comfortable recommending it to anyone looking for a great daily sport watch with some amazing history. If you want more information on this watch, go to secondtime.com. Check out all of the watches that we have for sale. If you like this video, subscribe. Definitely follow us on all of our social media. And I've been Paul. You've been you. Thanks for watching.